You know, making a sequel probably sucks, doesn't it?
We're doing a sequel. It's time to get some more money. Come on, everybody, here comes E3.
That's not to say there aren't upsides. After all, it's all Hollywood pumps out these days. But one wrong move and you could take a success into failure. This goes doubly for console launches.
A bad play and you go from Atari to, well, Atari.
This is the predicament Nintendo found itself in the Nintendo Switch 2. The original was released after a time when investors and everyone was telling them to leave the hardware industry due to the massively misjudged release of the Nintendo Wii U. Originally announced as codename NX during a mobile game partnership to show, don't worry investors, we are not leaving the console game industry, the Switch very much proved to be a runaway success. So when you're making a follow-up, what do you do? It's like if in Blues Brothers, they didn't just save the orphanage, but suddenly it's a massive 501c3 charity, and the orphans all got 401ks at the end of it all. Their answer to that is the very iterative Nintendo Switch 2. And while launch sales do look good, to say it's been controversy-free would, be far off the mark. So today I'm going to be looking at everything from the initial pre-launch rumors to the announcements itself,
Around the first year or so of releases.
to everything in between. I know some would prefer to just view the product in isolation from all the controversy and pre-release stuff, but for me it's all tied in a Gordian knot, and I think my opinions would be missing important context if I didn't at least touch on them as they came up. So without further ado,
Let's get this show started.
it's safe to say that this thing was one of the most leaked consoles of all time. This was before even the Switch 2 itself, as I swear, if I got a penny every time the words Nintendo Switch Pro was supposedly in development, I could swim in that shit like I was Scrooge McDuck. Reading interviews, it seems like the Switch 2 itself started development around 2019, which makes it increasingly hilarious that it only took, 5 years? And they still got the entire console leaked by some Chinese manufacturer before it was even officially announced. Not some weird prototype, the actual console. The pre-release itself sorta had a common theme, in my opinion. Nintendo, a company known for wanting control over how its IP was seen, known for taking down uploads of their soundtracks and fan games and all that fun stuff, not wanting you to emulate legacy content on PC, kinda lost control of the narrative around their console. Nintendo's response to this is radio silence until stealthily dropping a release trailer saying, hey yeah, it exists, new Mario Kart, Donkey Kong has a new design, fuck you, wait for the Direct. It seemed like, to me anyway, like a desperate power play to try to gain control of the narrative. This was paired also with them eventually launching their own news app a week before that Nintendo Direct. And then we have the Direct itself, which certainly proved to have some of the most headline-drawing announcements they ever made. Initial impressions were pretty good. Half of the Direct was dedicated to showing the improvements over the first Switch. The second half was kinda split between showing first-party games meant to take use of the Switch 2's power, third-party developers being on the ride for Nintendo when it's usually pretty shaky, and trailers for shit that they don't have gameplay for, but I digress. That positive feeling lasted for about 30 seconds after the Direct though, because what made headlines wasn't what was in it, but what was left out. Stuff such as the console's price, Mario Kart World introducing the $80 price point for video games, the confusing situation around game keycards, making what people viewed as a glorified instruction manual $10, and many more I'm probably forgetting about right now. At the time, while I did have a ton of other problems with all these decisions, the main one that stuck out to me was, why the fuck do you try to hide this from the customer? Now afterwards I heard a lot of people say stuff such as it would dampen the mood of the Direct, or they'd have to convert to multiple different pricings and all that shit. And that's good and fine. But the Switch 1's presentation was live and they still kind of gave out price points for that console. It felt like Nintendo didn't trust their consumers with that information, and it just came off patronizing. Now, in spite of my reservations, I still bought the thing. One, because my old Switch was basically on death's door. I got one of the launch year ones that is hackable, but its battery has seen better days, and all the controversy around it drew me to it. I wanted to kind of experience it for myself. As a console, the Switch 2 doesn't exactly reinvent the wheel.
It builds on the foundations left by its predecessor.
A lot of its changes are more minor and can't be implemented in every game. Which brings me to the first mistake of this console, Nintendo Switch Welcome Tour. So let's start talking prices. In America, the Nintendo Switch is $450 on its own, $500 if you want Mario Kart bundled with it. Personally, I expected the console to be $500, so it's not really a deterrent for me, but that's still a pretty big investment. What I always do, especially with handhelds, is I kind of bring it around to show my friends so that they can, get a feel for it to see if they want it. Pricing Welcome Tour, I think, greatly diminishes that effect of letting people see a lot of these features that aren't in games like, say, Mario Kart. However, this only works if Welcome Tour is a good system showcase. Unfortunately, it is not. The word that can be used to describe Nintendo Switch Welcome Tour is confused. I am not sure who this game is particularly for.
The big draw of Welcome Tour is these minigames meant to show off the features of the console. They aren't particularly in-depth. They're also locked behind this weird progression system. Imagine having to gather collectibles to unlock boxing or bowling in Wii Sports. It's just a strange choice for a system showcase title.
All of Nintendo's, what I'd like to call system showcase titles, usually are built on a theme to give them character. Wii Sports was built on a sports center that eventually evolved into the tropical location of Wuhu Island for a resort. Nintendo Land was based on a theme park, which proved to be prophetic, basing a lot of its mini-games on Nintendo's own IPs. And One to Switch was a mistake. Welcome Tour is based on a museum exhibit, something probably on Nintendo's mind after opening their own last year. This concept, however, is rendered in such a soulless art style it would make Google's graphic designers blush. Most of the mini-games are technical showcases of stuff such as HDR and don't really have gameplay. The ones I can remember off the top of my head are the UFO mouse control minigame and the 4K version of Super Mario Bros. Included. Some you outright need peripherals such as the Pro Controller or Switch camera to access. Though there is a cheat code in order to skip them, which I'll give them that, at least it's not behind a paywall necessarily. I struggle to think who would actually like to sit down for this as their first Switch 2 experience. The game blocks off a lot of its content trying to explain this console you bought, with inane collectathon stuff of informational panels telling you, hey, do you know how magnets work?
Fucking magnets, how do they work?
And there are mini-games in here that require the use of handheld mode, making it far from streamer friendly. Even for a price as small as $10, this is supposed to show you what the Switch 2 is capable of. I feel it is very underwhelming. If you're gonna charge me for this, have a clear vision for it. Rather than this weird middle ground between tech showcase that should not have left the days of E3 and video game
that it currently occupies.
A friend of mine proposed the theory that this is more so meant as a developer's tool to test out new features. Hence the very minimalist theming and relative simplicity of these minigames. While that would make sense, that makes me wonder a couple things. Why is it offered up for the general user then? Why isn't it just bundled with a dev kit? Some of these technical showcases, such as the fireworks display, take advantage of HDR, which is available on a lot of other consoles. So why exactly is it bundled in as if it's this revolutionary new feature? If it's a collection of technical showcase things, why then have there be a progression system? Wouldn't you just want to have the display demos operating immediately to test out these features? The developers of Welcome Tour happen to be NDQ, mostly known for the modern-day Mario Party games, and with Jamboree TV suffering a similar fate to Welcome Tour, I just have a feeling it's a lot more likely to be poor execution. In direct contrast, what does leave an impression is the Switch 2 hardware, features, and design philosophy behind the console. If I had to describe it, there was a good part in the Switch 1 presentation where they talked about how all of the features on the Switch 1 were a culmination of every successful idea Nintendo ever had. With the sequel, Nintendo looked at their ideas that either didn't work out, were never followed through on, or in other cases were dropped due to technical limitations, and tried to re-implement them into the Switch ecosystem. One of these reworked, scrapped ideas include the magnetic attachment site for the brand new Joy-Con on the Switch 2. Rejected back then due to fears of being too flimsy, Its implementation many years later I have found to be very sturdy. For me, mouse mode is what caught my eye, as not only could I see how it could help aiming in more high-tense shooting titles, how it could be used in games that heavily use the mouse cursor like RTSs, or how it could be implemented in more casual experience such as the DS visual novels of old. Casual games have had a much smoother implementation of mouse mode. If you want to have two games to keep your eye on using this feature, in the more experimental sort of vein include Dear Me I Was. It's a short game, but for $8, I had my money's worth out of it. And I am intrigued by the upcoming mouse work. The trailer really gave me a lot of WarioWare and Rhythm Heaven vibes. I think more traditional games have had a harder time implementing it. I played Cyberpunk and Fortnite with the control scheme, and they don't play nice along with gyro. Previews of Prime 4 indicating that a control scheme that allows you to switch between both are going to be viable, which I am very excited for. Gyro can be used for broader, less intense moments, while mouse mode could be used for more precise aiming. Others have also said that the Joy-Con is very harsh on the wrist while using as a mouse. I personally have not run into said problem, but I could see how it could in long and intense sessions of gameplay. More of a suite of features, Nintendo has tried to reincorporate a lot of the wireless functionality from their Wii and 3DS days back into the Switch 2. Game Share, for example, brings back the old Mario Kart DS download play matches of old into a new generation. Though that being said, I have had a lot more issues using it compared to DS download play. Considering they have claimed that Game Share is done via streaming, I am interested by how much is each Switch contributing to this process. This was tied in very heavily with another feature, Game Chat, or as it's called derogatorily, Nintendo Discord. Game Chat was meant to be a mix of video conference software with the vibe of a campus room. There was a heartwarming moment in the Game Chat developer interviews where executives tried it out for the first time and they all reminisced together about the development of SNES and N64 games they worked together on. But then I thought it took a global pandemic for Nintendo to improve their online infrastructure, and there was also a bit of humor in that. For its part, Game Chat's a fine enough feature, but those trailers were not lying that screen sharing runs at 15 FPS. It was wild to me to see Nintendo hype up the display as being 1080p, 120 FPS, and to be able to do HDR, while simultaneously having this ghosting issue. In 3D games I found it to not be distracting, but it stuck out a lot more when I play 2D games like Super Mario World. It's definitely a satisfactory piece of tech, but this along with the battery life would make me perfectly understand why someone, even if they were a Nintendo diehard, would wait on buying it. Unless you have that Boblax gremlin where you need to sell your Tesla in order to fuel your Nintendo and weed addiction. The Big N, however, needed another type of fuel. After all, what is a console launch without a big, heavy-hitting IP? And the Switch 2, they felt, had something that would give it a rocket start. I have never seen such a quick shift in opinion from the launch day honeymoon to the month or so post-launch clarity as I have Mario Kart World. I'm not a big Mario Kart guy personally. Hell, without the bundle I don't think I would have gotten the game. But it's still a game that stretches out its content a lot in spite of its premium price point, along with having a lot of cool ideas that just aren't integrated well enough with each other. It's a shame because the game does have a lot of strong aspects. I really love the art style. The developers described Mario Kart 8 as sleek and wanted to move Mario Kart World to have a more cartoony and animated sort of look. This helps World look visually distinct from Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and I really think it fits for what this game is going for. The game's soundtrack's also a high point. It has a lot of variation in terms of musical style, and sometimes pulled from obscure games. I never thought I would hear Nintendo officially remix a Mario Land 2 track, but you know, they did it! Movement in Mario Kart World is probably the best I've ever had in the series. I've always had this problem with the franchise because it didn't ever feel really Mario. When I think of Mario, I think of jumping around, schmoovin', and connecting things like jumps, rolls, and dives all together to create such a fluid motion. And the trick system brings that to Mario Kart. It opens up options on how to maneuver through a track, especially the wall running, which while hard to get at first, is really satisfying once you get a handle on it. This brings us to what you're moving out through, the titular world of Mario Kart World. It feels as wide as an ocean, deep as a puddle. The open area just kind of feels empty, especially in free roam. You can't track anything in terms of challenges on the open world, and all you get for completing those challenges are stickers.
This makes you feel real important, huh? Not enough stickers?
Yes, it is a iteration of a new concept for this series, but Diddy Kong Racing did a very similar thing with its hub world, and it just had better execution. Maybe you could have done something like tie characters in as an alternate way of locking them rather than dealing with Kamek's RNG bullshit, or maybe even unlocking music to a music player. On top of, adding a music player. Of course, the open world's also tied into the most controversial part of Mario Kart World, the intermission tracks. I do think that in moderation, the intermission tracks could have proved to be good shakeup to the Mario Kart formula. But with how they're distributed online, it would be like if you went to Olive Garden and only ate breadsticks. Pretty sure that line of reasoning was what actually caused Red Lobster to go bankrupt, thinking about it. While the full free lap tracks are pretty well designed around the new movement options, the intermission's highway-like design doesn't really offer a lot of walls to run on, for example. Occasionally you'll get rails that you can grind on, but far from optimal. It also causes a lot of the tracks to blend together because people don't get a lot of time to race them in online worldwide races. In the fighting game community, there is a concept known as the Discord Fighter, which is whether due to the netcode being shit or the player base being dead, players have retreated to Discord in order to solve their matchmaking woes. Now, why have I brought this up? People have gone to the Mario Kart World Discord in order to avoid the intermission track. Nintendo has bizarrely made it so that Mario Kart World is the first Discord kart racing game, which is bizarre. Even if you don't want to do a classic racing mode, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe already had private tournament modes you can freely choose the rules for. So why didn't it exactly have a listing for online rooms much like that game? Is the removal of a feature that I think would have solved a lot of people's problems. The team has been working on this game ever since Mario Kart 8 Deluxe came out, spending all that time reinventing the wheel for a series that really didn't need that much. The social media features in this game feel like they are heavily trying to recapture that sort of buzz The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild had during the Switch 1 launch, but I don't think it's to the same effect, for two reasons. One, Zelda had a ton of systems that played nice with each other and made it very easy to share on social media. And two, Zelda was a single-player game. If you make a big multiplayer game your launch title, it relies on a healthy player base. And if you make a small change, let's say updating percentages of the chances certain tracks show up in the pool of online courses, that pisses people off, it starts a domino effect that kills the online for your game, at least for a little while. By the end of June, I already felt as burnt out on Mario Kart World as I had for multiple years on Mario Kart 8. So what other offerings did the Switch 2 launch provide? Oh boy, reheated leftovers. I do find these sorts of third-party ports always fascinating, mostly because it's good to take a game that someone already knows and use it to put a new console through its paces and to set expectations. Think games like Mario 64 DS, Metal Gear Solid 3D, or even technical marvels such as the SNES port of Doom 1. Though you can't really talk about the Switch 2's third-party support without addressing the infamous game key cards. To put it simply, it's a license to a download. None of the game's data itself is on the card, leaving it a paperweight once the eShop goes down. Investors asked Shintaro Furukawa as to why the key cards became a thing. He claimed the reason they exist was due to the large file size of AAA games, future-proofing the Switch for larger-sized releases. Furukawa also cited the internal memory of the Switch 2 being 256, making the system more reasonable to be done compared to the Switch 1's 32 gigabytes. On first look, this reasoning checks out. I remember back in 2019, everyone was mogging Final Fantasy VII Remake for its, at the time, massive 82 gigabyte file size. Nowadays, 100 gigabytes is pretty standard for AAA gaming, especially for games built on the Unreal Engine. I think it's once you look harder into game keycards, the situation gets a lot more bizarre. To begin, I'm gonna go down a list of game keycards along with their file sizes. See if you notice a pattern. Dragon Ball Sparking Zero at 6.4 GB, Suikoden Collection at 10.9 GB, Puyo Puyo Tetris 2S at 3.2, Pac-Man World 2 Repack at 6.8 GB, Raido Remastered at 12.8 GB, and Bravely Default HD at 9.3. All these are smaller size games. They could even fit on a Switch 1 card. So why the need to become keycards? Well, Arc System Works got hacked, and one of the things in there was that there are only two options for Switch 2 cartridges. A 64GB model with everything on there, or a game keycard. So in trying to account for the larger end of the file size spectrum, they completely failed to account for the smaller scale games. This whole situation has caused a lot of confusion in consumers. On release day, I went down to pick up my copy of Donkey Kong Bananza, and there was one other guy there. And one of the first things he asked when he got the game he pre-ordered was, is it on the cart? And even had to double check with the employee to verify. If someone who has already bought and paid for a game is confused about this shit, how much does that fuck with the average consumer to think that every single Switch 2 game is a game keycard?
A lot of the third-party game keycard releases have not exactly done numbers sales-wise, with two notable exceptions. Pokemon Pokopia, which is probably boosted by the fact it is a Pokemon game mixed with a Animal Crossing life simulation, and Final Fantasy VII Remake, which was heavily discounted and bundled with some Magic the Gathering cards which are currently getting scalped to hell. I am interested to see if third-party support will be boosted or hindered by the prominence of keycards. Nintendo usually releases their consoles during a gap between the next iterations of Microsoft and Sony's consoles, which gives it a pretty strong start for third-party support, albeit usually with ports from the last console generation, before eventually dissipating, whether due to power or storage concerns. There is speculation that Nintendo is looking into expanding the storage options available for Switch 2 cards, so maybe collectors have a little bit of hope left. I do think they have enough feedback, considering when they put up a poll asking for people's thoughts on keycards, they had to shut that shit down because how many responses they received.
I do think this is a shame. I would often get games again on Switch just so I could have a physical copy. I love my gaming PC and all that. There is something knowing that I won't have any DRM necessary to boot up that game once again, even if it ran worse.
The only two game keycard games I was interested in at launch came out on PC anyway, so now you too, player, can experience the joys of Yongyan's Kiryu.
Moving on, it's time to talk about the other type of leftovers for a brand new video game console. Shit we could have been playing for the past 7 years!
So everyone's thinking about backwards compatibility is it's like replacing a part in a car. It's boiled down often to same software, different case. But that's an oversimplification of the matter. Forewarning though, I myself am not exactly a computer expert, so what I'm about to say is itself also a pretty generalized explanation. Generally, there are two methods companies usually go about doing this: software and hardware-based backwards compatibility. Hardware-based backwards compatibility usually has a smaller version of the previous console inside of the new one, meaning it boots up into a separate mode to load these games in. 3DS did this with DS games, and early PS3s did this with the PS2, for example. Software backwards compatibility, to grossly simplify, is more or less a souped-up emulator. Sometimes they have patches to work with specific games, but there is no hardware from previous generations. Examples of this are, say, the later editions of the PS3 that were cheaper, and Xbox's more recent attempts at backwards compatibility. Nintendo ran into issues with both of these approaches. The Switch 2 doesn't have any of the Switch 1's existing hardware in it, so that performance can be maximalized while keeping the sleeker profile the Switch is known for. But a software emulator would drain the battery way too quickly. The resulting solution is more of a translation layer that makes the Switch 1 game into Switch 2 code. Sort of like how Proton makes Windows games run on Linux. Of course, such a process means that there would be compatibility issues. And when that occurred, usually Nintendo would take down the software from the eShop and show a not compatible with the Switch 2, where the purchase button would be. Unless you're Pikmin free. Okay, so Pikmin free had these very weird issues, at which at the end of the day, or during a bingo battle, it would just flash these errors on screen. Other games were marked as uncompatible for less, so it felt like Nintendo was kind of giving a pass to a series that they owned, as well as want to grow bigger. This led to a video by a user named I'm Only Here Pikmin compiling these issues. Nintendo YouTuber and the Muppets designated Pikmin fan, Arlo, saw this and decided to respond.
It is unfortunate. The thing is, nothing about this I would consider borderline unplayable. I don't even know if I would call it completely broken, because like I don't know, like again, it's mostly like when I enter a stage, I get that glitch. But like I'm playing, I'm doing entire days, I'm doing challenge mode, and I'm seeing that like during the actual gameplay, really nothing is happening.
It was a very short bit of drama between the two creators, as the game was soon patched afterwards. But there is one line in one of I'm Only Here for Pikmin's response videos that has been living rent-free in my head since then.
I don't want to keep making videos about Pikmin Tree on the Switch 2, because, you know, when I first booted up Pikmin Tree on the Switch 2, I thought I'd be making 0 videos, and now I'm in beef with Arlo. I gotta keep a close eye on Sesame Street, or else I might get jumped.
Moving away from the drama digression, backwards compatibility on Switch 2 can take many forms. While Nintendo usually stuck to either a upgrade pack or a free update, third parties can vary heavily. Some games just ran better because they had uncapped frame rates or resolution. Others would have a Switch 1 and a Switch 2 version you could download and upgrade for. Others would have a Switch 1 and Switch 2 version, but without any path of upgrade for some reason. And Dragon Quest III just got an update in lieu of an actual Switch 2 edition. And the same company will use different methods for each game sometimes, Sega and Square Enix being the worst of this. Recently the Switch 2 has been updated to version 22, and added handheld boost mode, making it so that the console will start Switch 1 games as if they were docked. And it's a pretty good feature, it's one people expected actually to happen when the Switch 2 launched. And I like it, but my OCD makes me just ask for one thing. I just wish it was toggleable for individual games. Whether it be due to the increase in power drain it causes the console, or because of the incompatibility boost mode has in handheld when it comes to touch controls. I just wish there was options, because not every game needs it. But I still want it for games like Nier Automata, which increase in stability during portable mode when boost mode is on. Or games like Arkham Knight that look like they're dying otherwise. The two Zelda Switch games, Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild, were given the red carpet for their Switch 2 editions, having not only graphical performance increases, but also features via the new Zelda Notes app. Both games' re-releases were kinda treated as launch titles for the Switch 2. The console not struggling to run to Korok Forest is definitely an improvement, but the Zelda Notes stuff is what really fascinates me. Breath of the Wild had a lot of early Wii U gamepad features that were shown off during demos, that were eventually removed once they had to rework the game to be cross-gen on Switch 1 as well as the Wii U. So I guess Nintendo just had it floating around and said, hey, why don't we just reuse this, add some lore, polish it up a little bit, and we could charge an extra $10 for this stuff. Or alternatively, it's bundled in if you have Nintendo Switch Online Plus expansion pack for Nintendo Switch 2 systems. The Zelda Notes and game audio both come from different sources, so when I wanted to listen to one of the newly added logs, I would just pause and listen to my phone. Rather than simplifying navigation, like its intention, it really slows down how you navigate Hyrule. If someone's really interested, they'll probably just look it up on YouTube. There's also a lot of social features added in this app. For example, there's community-run item boxes you can borrow from, scanning QR codes for builds in Tears of the Kingdom, or even daily bonuses that you can get. All of these do present interesting little oddities to spice up a game you've already played. The most useful feature I found from the Enhanced Edition was the second save slot, but both have an interesting aura of a interesting what if, and I can respect that. Though as July came, there was one game that was looming over the Switch's launch. A heavy hitter that would have something to prove. An ambitious 3D platformer that would revive its series out of a long dormant slumber. Nintendo's been trying to rebuild Donkey Kong's brand image for a while now. At first, they distinguished Donkey Kong's own merch from Mario's brand. Then they cast Seth Dude Weed Lamau Rogen as DK in the new Mario movie. And right before Bananza got released, they announced that they're trying to make their own Donkey Kong movie. The crown banana for the second win of the Donkey Kong brand was Donkey Kong Bananza, a new 3D Donkey Kong game developed by team members that also worked on Mario Odyssey. Because of this shared lineage, a lot of people like to compare and contrast in a sort of which was better way. I find what's more fascinating is how it distinguishes itself as a brand that can coexist, rather than being just a weird little side project that they made in between Mario games. After all, you're not trying to see them make a Captain Toad movie or Yoshi's Island branded onesies. And when I first looked at trailers for the game, the main goal of the game to dive to the planet core was actually one of the first things I noticed as a direct contrast to Mario's platforming exploits. Super Mario Bros. As a side-scroller always focused more on horizontal movement. The journey of Mario Odyssey had a point A to point B structure that is very similar. Donkey Kong's arcade games, on the other hand, were always vertical. Moving upwards was always sort of a progression. Bananza not only pays homage to this verticality in the series, but going downwards kind of is a inversion of this. This pre-launch observation made me want to, despite not really knowing much about Donkey Kong as a franchise, dig into the games, mostly to see how they would pull from them to give Bananza its own unique identity. Mario in his 3D platformers moves around his environment. Donkey Kong uses it to progress. And the terrain destruction is an evolution of this concept, while also letting the player fulfill their fantasy of building gorilla nests. Similar to roll jumping off a ledge to gain a little bit of height, or using barrels in the background to throw at enemies. To go along with the destructible environments, it helps that they feel like they have, if you pardon the pun, a lot more depth. Mario Odyssey's levels usually had one or two gimmicks, which really fits for what that game was going for. But DK Bananza's layering of gimmicks on top of each other helps the world feel a lot more lived in. The frozen layer is a snowy area filled with all these dude bro zebras that can run really fast. But they also use the ice to make chocolate ice cream. And the chocolate is harvested from a furnace deeper in the frozen layer. And with the local map tracking which parts of the area are currently wrecked, you get very immersed. Also, can I just say, I love when we learn more shit about Nintendo's behind-the-scenes processes. Like, this shitty little Goomba demo they whipped up during Odyssey's development was what led to the destructible environments in Bananza. And Nintendo EAD looked at one image of Zebra Donkey Kong and said, yeah, we're gonna need Pauline to make this make sense. And I can't really talk about how they define this new era of Donkey Kong without bringing up the final boss. Spoilers, even though it's been a couple months since the game came out. Holy shit, I get why people like K. Rool now. Mario and Bowser have, their little tussles, but they could have some sort of agreement with a greater foe, or wanted to do some kart racing shit. With K. Rool, no, it's not like that. He just goes like, I'm taking over the game, you little monkey bitch. Donkey Kong, hello, I was stuck under here with my crew. You thought you took me down, motherfucker? No, I'm gonna go in with my little hovercraft thing and go shit on the city your granddaddy gave you. I wanna kill your entire monkey family. I'm gonna make everyone in the city raw bananas to feast on. Suffer, new donk! The fact that he just takes over Donkey Kong's whole deal from the original arcade game and is so unhinged. Probably one of the best final bosses this team ever did. I could go on and on about how much I love Bananza as a game. Could even be its own video. Before I do that, I'd like to give the game a little bit more time to breathe, especially after they dropped post-launch DLC for the game. Brief thoughts on Emerald Rush. The hub world's pretty fun, though empty as sin. Emerald Rush can be very fun in bursts, but due to its roguelike nature, I would say it's far from a must-have for anyone who has Bananza, because it's just so different from the main game. It feels comparable to Luigi's Balloon World from Mario Odyssey, and that shit was a free update. This being $20 does feel a bit pricey. Though Bananza's DLC announcement wasn't the only thing controversial revealed in that direct. It wasn't just the games and the system that got a price hike after all.
Now, Back to well.
Funny meme date of the presentation aside, I think the big takeaway from this direct is that Nintendo is certainly in their arrogance arc. With the Mario brand being at its most successful era right now, they really do think they can get away with charging anything. And to be fair, I think they're right. For now anyway. Mario Galaxy 1 and 2 for $70. Are you really telling me that this is worth the same amount as Tears of the Kingdom because you put some HD textures and added some storybook lore? Come the fuck up. And I wouldn't be so chapped about this, but this is a tie-in to the Mario Galaxy movie that they want you to buy the Rosalina Mario Galaxy Book 2, along with the Mario Galaxy Amiibo, and none of which are cheap. So, again, if it's cross-promotion, it just comes off as tone-deaf.
Hurry, buy one, buy them all! Buy them all! Buy them all!
And oh dear, the Amiibo. I have seen these things gathering dust when I went to a local Target, despite the price increase. Guess no one wants the iconic Metroid character Silux, who showed up in only like one game fully and 2 post-credit scenes, enough to free him from the clearance aisle. So, I'll be honest, the Viola Amiibo was pretty fucking cool. And then we get to the post-launch DLC shit, which I know these are usually made long after the game's finished, but it's just a bad look that you're already promoting buy our $30 season pass before the game's even out. And I think I'm gonna leave the video there for now. Trust me, I have a lot more to say on the Switch 2, but at the same time, a lot's happened since I started this video, so splitting up I think is the most logical continuity-wise. But I'll leave it with a final thought. Right now, the Switch 2 doesn't really have its own identity. It feels like more of the same, and it feels like Nintendo's mind is elsewhere right now. Where else? Well, wouldn't you like to know, Weather Boy? Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Endslate, the pseudo-channel update / video production ramble segment I have stolen from former YouTube creator Yuri of Wind. I haven't uploaded in a long time on here. Part of it is, yes, I am a lazy asshole, but the other is, I swear, every time I tried to record footage for a video, my hard drive would spontaneously combust. The Pokemon ones were real bad, because I actually did have all the footage for the Sword and Shield DLC recorded. But then the hard drive took a bad fall, and hours and hours of footage kind of are lost. I've pretty recently actually sent the hard drive in for recovery, so I'll see what I can recover. Because I have a lot to say about the current state of the franchise. I don't really think the DLC of Sword and Shield had much meat on the bone, but in the larger context it applies. So wait for that video in the year 2030. As for the Switch 2 review, originally I had an idea to where I was going to make a final swan song for the Switch 1 era. It was a whole script. I even had it edited by a personal friend of mine. But the big reason was it was just made too late, and the Switch 2 presentation actually happened afterwards, so it was like, that grace period between new consoles was really lost. And also after watching it, I sort of realized that the legacy of the Switch 1 is irrevocably tied to the Switch 2, considering a lot of the design decisions, all that played into each other. Funnily enough, this was supposed to be a quick project that I was going to make over the summer to get back to the video editing. Started around the launch day of the Switch 1, only to balloon in size. I really do not like making multi-part videos, mostly because I like to try to say everything I can in one. But the big reason I decided to split it up was I showed this to a friend, and he was like, oh, you know, you have a lot of meat here, and I think there'd be continuity issues if you delayed it all into, like, one massive video, like the Pokemon one. So I decided to split it up, you know, divide it to parts, and goal is, hopefully, fingers crossed, knock on wood, I will be able to release this before the Mario movie comes out, because I do think a lot of things about their strategy is going to change once that film comes out. There's a lot of audio consistency issues in this one, and I apologize for that. One, I did not write a script because I thought the spontaneity is what got me to do more stuff. That turned out wrong. And the other reason was, around the time I was planning this out, I decided to get 2 new things. One was a new capture card, because the old one was decrepit and not really usable for 1440p. There's still footage from that one, but
The other thing I got was a new microphone. And I thought it'd be very clever of me to switch microphones halfway through, specifically during the backwards compatibility section, so that it would go along with the whole same hardware, different case line. Big problem with that is later on, due to various things, I'd have to re-record lines. So it has the older audio in those older sections, so it's just like a fucking mess. I kind of tried normalizing the audio back there, but, you know, it's stylistically designed to be that way, but we could diminish the effects. So yeah, it's great to be in the editing chair again, and I'd like to, as an aside, just thank everyone that has previewed this video for me. A lot of feedback usually helps in terms of how I construct it, because I really do like making these things, even if I don't have that much time. I like expressing how I feel in a very visual style, and I like doing a lot of editing and all this shit, even if I find it a pain in the ass. Next time and in the future, I am really gonna try, like, Scout's Honor. Genuinely gonna try to keep it more structured, so it's not entirely this multi-year long process that I feel burnout from every fucking time. I have an idea where part 2 is going to go. I know what I'm going to talk about. There will still be minor adjustments depending on how Nintendo's 2026 is going to go, but I kind of feel I have enough data to adjust plans midway through. So anyway, yeah, it's great to see you again, and I'm going to try to have more content. Hope you've all been doing good, and stay safe. Scout's Honor, I'll try to see you all soon.